4 a.m., Sunday, 12th November. RAF Lancasters take off on a 1,200-mile flight to Norway. 29 of the four-motored craft head for Tromsøy Fjord, where the Tirpitz, last of Germany's big battleships, had eluded two recent attacks. The first, on 15th September, was unsuccessful owing to an amazing smoke screen created by thousands of smoke pots. These pictures, taken from a reconnaissance plane at 13,000 feet, show how effectively the Tirpitz was concealed. No hits were scored by the RAF on this run. In these British films, the Tirpitz is seen firing her 15-inch guns as the second attack was attempted on 29th October. Again, the smoke screen, this time combined with bad weather, made bullseye bombing a hazardous venture. However, the RAF managed to score one hit with a 12,000-pounder. As long as the Tirpitz remained afloat, she was a potential threat to the Russian convoy route, tying up strong forces of British warships in northern waters. She had to be sunk, and on 12th November, the Germans finally are caught by surprise. There is no smoke screen, and direct hits are scored. Flying between 13,000 and 16,000 feet, each of the 29 Lancasters looses a 6-ton earthquake bomb. The German battleship is hit at her bow, amidships, and toward the stern. This action was photographed simultaneously by two RAF camera planes. Her guns are silenced, and the Tirpitz is again covered by smoke, this time from flames that seal her doom. Officially listed as 35,000 tons, she's believed to have been closer to 45,000. The warship heels over into the shallow fjord. The Tirpitz carried 1,600 men. When the Germans finally broke their silence about the ship, they claimed that a large part of the crew had been saved. Structural steel for all 6 Allied armies is made available as the Army sets up its own production 17 miles from frontline activity on the Moselle River. The management of the big plant at Differdange, Luxembourg, had been requested to operate blast furnaces, Bessemer converters, and the mill for rolling steel beams on an 8-hour-per-day basis. Iron ore from surrounding mountains is mixed with coke and limestone imported from Belgium. The output of the hot air steel works since the Allies took over has been chiefly heavy steel I and H beams for bridging water barriers before the Reich. Localized overseas production of vital engineering replacements obviously alleviates strain on the services of supply. On a normal crossing, a single Liberty ship can carry approximately the same tonnage as is turned out by the Luxembourg mill in a 2-week period. To haul this amount of heavy steel beams from docking points to the front lines would require 250 railroad flat cars. On 10th November, General Dwight D. Eisenhower rounds out an inspection tour of Allied units preparing for the mid-month general offensive against the Reich. The Supreme Allied Commander visited positions in France, Belgium, Holland, and Germany. Jeeps are left behind as General Eisenhower leads his party up a muddy hill to the command post of Major General Charles H. Gerhardt's 29th Infantry Division. At a review, General Ike chats with doughboys fresh from the front lines. The day before, at Brussels, he had told the Belgian Parliament, "We are fighting an enemy who understands only one thing, force, and we intend to apply force to the utmost." Flood conditions caused by torrential rains along a sector of the Western Allied battle line. This waterlogged highway is a main supply route and one of many roads along the 3rd and 7th Army fronts affected by late fall rains. It's the time of the great drives for Metz and Strasbourg. The flooded Moselle River inundates the countryside at Cavis on the 3rd Army front, submerging planes used to fly blood plasma and medical supplies to forward areas. The stream rose overnight, expanding its width from 50 to 1,500 yards. It's not known if the sudden rise was due to the heavy rainfall or demolition of a dam upstream. Aiming for a bridgehead across the Moselle, elements of the 90th Division prepare to negotiate the stream in assault boats. This ferry service was devised pending construction of a bridge by the engineers. A ramp is constructed to bridge an area between high ground and the assault boats. According to engineers, the river is 54 inches deep, just a little too much for jeeps, trucks, or tanks to try to ford. Efforts to provide a suitable span across the swollen river were met by enemy artillery fire. The ferry service gets underway, every inch of the crossing carrying a threat from floating mines and from Nazi artillery on the opposite bank. Heavy rainfall along another sector of the American advance delays the progress of line straightening operations. 48 hours of rain bogs down tanks, which were being used as artillery. As the earliest and harshest winter in 80 years comes to northern Europe, snow camouflages the terrain from the Dutch lowlands to the icy passes of the Vosges. Here, awaiting the mid-November general offensive, gunners of a French division cooperating with the 7th Army stand guard at their emplacements. The morning of 9th November, at a command post area on the 1st Army front in Belgium. Further east on the Belgian line, snow covers machine gun positions near the village of Krinkelt. Infantrymen line up for noon chow, as a snow-covered vehicle serves as a dining table. Starting at Saipan in June, then striking at the Bonines and landing on Guam, the Navy's 1,500-mile Pacific offensive drew closer to the Philippines. Then came simultaneous invasion of the Palau Group and Morotai, softening up strikes against Formosa and Philippine bases, the pounding of Leyte, and first landings by General MacArthur's troops. Guarding Leyte against possible Jap naval action was the U.S. 7th Fleet under Vice Admiral Thomas C. Kincaid. The larger 3rd Fleet of Admiral William F. Halsey, Jr. was standing off eastern Luzon as protection against enemy action from the north. The only ship passages through the Philippines are Surigao Strait, running between Leyte and Mindanao, and San Bernardino Strait between Samar and Luzon. On 23rd October, carrier searches discovered 2 strong enemy naval forces moving eastward toward these passages. In spite of damage inflicted by our carrier aircraft, the enemy gained contact with units of the 7th Fleet. Admiral Kincaid had divided his fleet to cover both straits. On the morning of the 24th, the enemy force which sortied through San Bernardino Strait was engaged off Samar Island. A task group detached from the 3rd Fleet, including heavy ships and carriers, aided in the destruction and routing of the enemy force. The southern enemy units, which attempted to pass through Surigao Strait, were met by Rear Admiral Jesse B. Ollendorf's force of battleships, cruisers, and destroyers. The Admiral himself commanded the vessels on the left flank. Rear Admiral Weiler, commanding battleships, was in the center. Rear Admiral Berkey commanded the right flank force of cruisers and destroyers. Our ships were firing on fixed ranges. As the enemy vessels were under crossfire, we could hit them with guns and torpedoes at the same time. Our forces pursued the retreating enemy through both the Surigao and San Bernardino Straits. Meanwhile, a Jap carrier force north of Luzon had been overtaken and defeated in a surprise maneuver by the 3rd Fleet. In his October 29th communique, Admiral Chester W. Nimitz reported that at least 58 enemy vessels were sunk or damaged in the Second Battle of the Philippine Sea. These Navy films cover an early phase of the 6-day battle wherein one of our fleets east of the Philippines was under heavy attack by land-based planes. Zeke comes down in flames. It was in this attack that the USS Princeton was hit by a bomb. The ship was so badly damaged by a subsequent explosion in her magazine that she had to be sunk. The Princeton, a 10,000-ton carrier of the Independence class, was the first combat carrier lost in 2 years. Otherwise, most of the American carriers escaped damage. Here, one of our aircraft, an Avenger, returns with a missing left wheel and makes a safe landing. In paying tribute to the fleet's airmen, Admiral Nimitz said in his communique, much of the credit for the destruction inflicted on the Japanese fleet goes to the naval airmen who gallantly and relentlessly pressed their attacks home with telling effect. At Taro, Burma, northwest of Mogong, the art of jungle living is illustrated for American troops. The rudiments of local cooking, makeshift style, are explained to a GI class by Naga natives. Also, plants and other growth common to this area are classified as to their edible values. Next, the party goes out into the jungle for field demonstrations, with both Burmese and Australian vets as instructors. The GIs are introduced to bamboo shoots, whose core is edible. Flowers and plants which contain water fit for drinking are given proper identification. This training is of intrinsic value in view of the harshness and isolation of campaigning in the Burma wilds. Survival is often a question of how much the individual soldier has learned about improvisation. For instance, how to make rope from bamboo to tie together the sections of a lean-to shelter. The Australian veteran demonstrates the accepted procedure for putting together such a shelter. A grass covering provides protection against the elements. In addition to its employment for shelters of this type, bamboo also comes in mighty handy when an emergency raft must be constructed. The poles are fitted and lashed together as shown, and you don't have to be a mechanical whiz to figure out the best assembly. In an emergency, it almost comes natural-like. And so the CBI soldier learns what to eat and how to travel, jungle style. Wherever similar conditions prevail, the procedure's about the same. A pilot on Guadalcanal puts the machete to one of its countless uses as he shows how cooking and drinking vessels can be made from bamboo. The machete is flicked like a tennis racket, with wrist kept flexible to prevent the hand from tiring. Bamboo has ridges running solidly through the trunk, making each section a separate watertight compartment. At this Air Force school on Guadalcanal, air crew members are taught how to survive indefinitely if cast away on a South Pacific island. The soldier learns that the only parasite-free water sources are trees or vines. A 6-foot section of the ropey vine shown here yields approximately half a cupful. He saves some of the water for cooking purposes. Applying his knowledge of edible plants, he's picked sweet potatoes, string beans, and eggplant for his dinner. Food has been gathered, water obtained, cooking utensils made. So now the pilot slits and notches a bamboo stalk to make a fire pot. Bamboo shavings supply tinder. Even if you've never been a Boy Scout, you should have an idea as to how to proceed from now on. It's as easy as all that. Incidentally, matches should not be kept in emergency kits. They should be carried on the soldier's person, carefully sealed in a waterproof container. Jungle cooking has one cardinal rule. If you're not sure, boil it. Take no chances with parasites. Tonight's menu is vegetable soup. The vegetables are cut into pieces and cooked slowly over a small fire. If there's any doubt in selecting vegetables, a set of simple safety rules should be applied. Avoid all kinds of milky sap. Do not eat fruit and plant seeds. Never eat plants or fruits that have a bitter taste. To get ready for bed, the pilot collects palm fronds from which to weave a dry sleeping mat. Why sleep on the damp sand? A simple in and out basket weave is used. Hats and other useful aids can be made in the same manner. While awaiting rescue, relax. Make the most of what's at hand. Keep all clothing, no matter how hot it is. Get water even before food. It can be simple. Combine good common sense with careful application of fundamental training principles. Late November on the Aachen front. The American 9th and 1st Armies were driving on Ruhr River objectives approximately 3 weeks before the surprise German counteroffensive. Below are trenches dug by the Nazis as part of the area's elaborate defensive system. The enemy manned these fortifications with small arms and machine guns, and according to observers, when we laid down a barrage, he retired to the protection of cellars in nearby villages with which many of the trenches connect. At Eschweiler, captured on 22nd November, a typical stretch of Hitler's superhighway before Cologne is put to use by American forces. A mile or so east of Eschweiler, the town of Eisweiler has been captured on the 26th. A bridge connecting with the superhighway is rushed to completion by combat engineers. This forward progress by our armies continued despite stiffening enemy resistance. But behind it all, the Nazis were preparing for their major counterblows, which were to become a grim reality on 16th December. Field Marshal von Rundstedt's troops struck south of these troops, who were struggling through the mud in the Aachen sector. At the time of these pictures, our drive dominated the Western Front, with not even adverse weather conditions stalling our advance for too long a period. In some places, the roads were virtually impassable, with deep mud bogging down men and equipment. A frontline salvage operation. Jeep rescues Jeep. A 155 self-propelled gun is fired point blank at an observation post inside Frenz, Germany, northeast of Eschweiler. Range, 2,000 yards. Five direct hits are scored. Opening fire on objectives across the Ruhr River. This river, now 500 feet wide, including the flooded area along each bank, flows northwestward about midway between Aachen and Cologne, entering the Maas at Roermond. WP shells explode on the east bank of the Ruhr. Fire is directed from an OP just south of Jülich. Several hundred miles south of Aachen, Alsatians fight flames in villages to which the Nazis set the torch before fleeing the area above the Swiss border. An advance spearheaded by the 1st French Army has succeeded in turning the flank of German positions in the Vosges. The breakthrough brings elements of the 6th Army Group to Mulhouse and the west bank of the Rhine. Additional films of the Mulhouse siege show final skirmishes leading up to the city's liberation. The civilian population of 10,000 has taken shelter in the cellars of houses and factories. The bag of prisoners includes a number of officers. Part of the staff of the German 19th Army were taken prisoner at Mulhouse. Alsatian patriots parade into the freed city. During the German occupation, they were subjected to forced labor. While Mulhouse is being reduced, Saarburg at the north end of the sector falls to 7th Army units. The swiftness of the advance by General Patch's troops forces the enemy to abandon many weapons. Due east of Saarburg lies Sabern, which is captured on 22nd November. On the following day, Strasbourg is reached. At Saint-Die, important highway terminus below Strasbourg, roadblocks were built by the Germans to stem the Vosges offensive. An abandoned 77mm howitzer overlooks the only roadway leading to the summit. 81mm mortars apparently rushed into position as the Americans approached. Captured Russian machine guns, approximately caliber 30. The Nazis also used captured Russian ammo. In addition to the gun emplacements, the Nazi defenses included a system of trenches, the construction of which was interrupted by the entry of our troops. Additional evidence of enemy precautions before the Rhine plain at Imling in the Saarburg sector. Camouflaged 20.3 centimeter guns. The enemy's materiel losses have mounted with each new push by the combined French-American armies northeast of the Belfort Gap. Here, a wooden framework and haystack were used to conceal the 20.3-centimeter weapon. At Strasbourg on 26 November, a total of approximately 10,000 prisoners are ready to be moved to the rear. The officers and men will be transported southwest to Épinal, from whence they will be sent to Allied internment camps. Women prisoners, members of the Nazi equivalent of the WWII. Several German army nurses are included. At Épinal, on the way to the rear, just prior to the December German offensive, the total number of prisoners taken since D-Day was 750,000. The enemy's estimated total casualties, including killed and long-term wounded, not less than 1,250,000. Aerial views of the German city of Jülich, central Nazi strong point before the 9th Army's advance to the Ruhr River. On 3rd December, Jülich was still part of the enemy's principal defenses east of the Ruhr. Farther north along the west bank of the river, infantrymen mop up in the shell-torn city of Linnich, increasing the Allied bulge spreading out from Aachen. A church, apparently taken for an Allied OP, comes under heavy Nazi artillery fire. German dead give mute evidence to some of the heaviest opposition of the Allied winter offensive. Linnich, occupied 3rd December, secures for the 9th Army an area of 8 miles along the western bank of the Ruhr River. Anopheles maculapennis, a big name for a little mosquito, but during the Sicilian campaign, that malaria-bearing spotted wing KO'd the equivalent of 2 full infantry divisions. That's why Air Force's personnel on Corsica is pitching into mosquito control with a vengeance. On Corsica, August is a significant month. That Napoleon was born there one August doesn't bother our GIs. More important now is that it's the favorite birthday of the modern Corsican killer. In quiet waters, the female mosquito lays her eggs. Soon, these hatch from wrigglers to tumblers to dive bombers. Drainage is one method of eliminating these insect menaces. On East Coast lowlands, shunned by Corsicans as mosquito badlands, are operational bases for American fighter and bomber groups. Troops manning them must be protected against malaria. Oil on water chokes and kills mosquito larvae. In 6 months, 42,000 gallons are sprayed this way. Sure death for the spotted wing babies. Commercial Paris green mixed with lime. Hand-operated dusters film the drainage ditches with this larvicide. An answer to problems posed by large areas. An A-20 bomber capable of spreading over 1 ton of Paris green each trip through a Bombay hopper and a Venturi opening. A trapdoor controlled by the pilot regulates the flow of dusting mixture into the Venturi, which sprays it behind the plane in flight. Agitator blades break up lumps for even dusting. An oversized funnel helps load the hopper. Out buzzing mosquitoes at 10-foot levels on their home grounds. Calling cards of 160 tons of Paris green during summer months warn Anopheles the Yanks are gunning for her, and control measures pay off on Corsica. From last March, cases of malaria had dropped over 50% by August, when it's supposed to be open season for the spotted wing. This means you. Each GI here is responsible for his own malaria discipline. Atabrine won't prevent malaria, but it may prevent the symptoms. Pills away, Captain. In other words, don't get caught with your pants down when Anopheles is around. Smear it on. You can take it, but Anopheles can't. This doesn't go with every mosquito net, but the bars come in handy when Anopheles is on the prowl. The aerosol bomb spray can kill every mosquito in here within 4 seconds. The net will do its job if it's tucked in securely. Success of any malaria control program depends on cooperation from the average GI. Don't be number one on the bite parade. From Saipan on 25th October, B-24s strike at Iwo Jima in the Bonin Islands. Targets are airfields and harbor facilities. Phosphorus shells seen at right center and phosphorus bombs released into the bomber formation from high-flying interceptors are typical of Jap anti-aircraft tactics. Each streak marks the path of a phosphorus pellet. On the whole, this Jap weapon has been ineffective. It's so widely employed, however, that Ordnance in the Field studies captured types with considerable interest. At a bomber base on Saipan, a group ordnance officer demonstrates the assembly of a captured Jap 32-kilogram phosphorus bomb. The side fins rotate the bomb for greater stability. 3 1/2 pounds of picric acid bursting charge are contained in the tail cone and in a steel tube running the bomb's length. The canister itself holds 198 steel pellets filled with phosphorus. A test demonstrates that combat crews have underrated the range and explosive power of the Jap 32-kilogram bomb. A 250-kilogram bomb of nearly the same type is also prepared for detonation. It's charged with 750 pellets. The 32 hurls pellets over an area bounded by a 300-yard radius. A 400-yard radius approximates the pellet dispersion of the larger Jap bomb. Lieutenant General Sir Oliver Leese and Daniel I. Sultan arrive for Allied staff conferences at Michinaw. Under discussion are the campaigns closing in on the Irrawaddy River ports of Katha and Bamo. Beginning in November, the drive included river crossing operations south of Michinaw and a combined push by British, Chinese, and American forces to forge a ring around Jap units defending the key Burmese cities. Starting along the road to Bamo on 17th November, an infantry regiment has about 110 miles to go before attaining its objective. En route, they pass equipment abandoned by British and Chinese troops in the 1942 Burma retreat. Near Kazu on 20th November, a bamboo bridge is crossed and a stream forded as pack train continues due south toward Bamo. The machete is employed to provide a clearing in the jungle for an airdrop of food and supplies. The cargo planes come over on 24th November. At this point, the Americans have driven south to Dali, Burma, 90 miles below Michinaw. The replenishment of rations is the signal for a belated Thanksgiving dinner in the heart of the Burmese wilds. Meanwhile, American observers aid Chinese forces in plotting an advance beyond the Dai Bing River, 30 miles north of Bamo. 75mm pack howitzers are dismounted and taken across in native canoes. The presence of strong enemy forces during an earlier phase of the advance in the Dai Bing River area necessitated a swing over into the hazardous Sinlunkaba Hills. This maneuver was turned into a flanking movement, bringing elements of the 38th Division to within 10 miles of Bamo's eastern escape route. Bamo encircled by Chinese troops. The systematic reduction of the city's defenses begins. One of the key objectives of units advancing on the city from the east is Bamo's major airfield. A wedge is driven in the enemy's lines. The attack is spearheaded by dive-bombing American P-47s. The GI still photographer in the foreground was wounded 20 minutes after shooting this phase of the air assault. The targets are dug-in Jap fortifications. Bomo falls on 15th December after 28 days of siege. Isley Field Saipan on the night of 27th November as B-29s load up for a strike on Tokyo. But Jap fighters attacked the great superfortress base shortly after midnight, temporarily interrupting the mission and damaging and destroying some of the giant planes. The raid, whose aftermath is recorded by these Air Corps films, lasted several minutes. Daylight reveals the extent of the damage. The effects of the strike included casualties among the personnel. Bulldozers helped smother flames by heaping earth onto the wreckage. Many B-29s were already loaded with bombs intended for Tokyo. In one instance, strafing started a gasoline fire which set off bombs in the bomb bay, the resulting concussion affecting the other B-29s parked close by. This raid was Japan's first answer to the opening of our aerial offensive against the enemy's mainland. The 77th Division in convoy skirts Leyte's coast. Objective, eastern shore of Ormoc Bay. Time, 3rd anniversary of Pearl Harbor. In Ormoc Bay, catching the Japs by surprise. Some of these films were made by Navy cameramen. After a 20-minute bombardment, the first wave goes ashore. Shortly thereafter, a Jap aerial assault against our ships. An enemy plane is hit. A transport struck amidship. Survivors from abandoned vessels. A sailor swims out to effect a rescue. The transport which sank had already unloaded troops. Other survivors leave their raft to board a minesweeper. A whaleboat rescues more survivors. The 77th, veterans of Guam, hit the beach at Epeel 3 miles below Ormoc. Heading inland and then along the coastal road to Ormoc, troops meet no opposition at first. At this time, the bulk of the enemy's forces is concentrated further down the coast to oppose the U.S. 7th Division. The 77th's objective, to split Jap forces on the island. Opposition is encountered near Camp Downs. Tank gives protective cover as medics remove a wounded soldier. On 10th December, opposition intensifies as infantry near Ormoc. Ormoc falls 52 days after General MacArthur launched the Battle of the Philippines. Capture of this last Jap stronghold on Leyte deprived the enemy of a major port through which supplies and reinforcements had been funneled to sustain their defense. A major part of the Japanese 35th Army of about 35,000 was left holding positions 15 miles to the north. The infantry enters Ormoc. A Jap suicide. The Jap garrison fought almost to the last man. This Jap was one of the few captured. he leaves American quarters after interrogation, stocking up on 10-in-1 field rations to sustain the final drive to eliminate the Japs from Leyte. Gas masks follow troops into the city. A wounded soldier is greeted by General Bruce, commander of the 77th. At a regimental command post, General Bruce and Colonel Vincent Tanzola confer on operations north of Ormoc. An attack is directed across the bay at an enemy transport previously caught while attempting to land reinforcements. The Ormoc landing was the last big operation on Leyte, paving the way for further amphibious landings in the Philippines. An amphibious operation gets underway from Leyte Gulf. Under command of Rear Admiral A.D. Struble, who commanded naval craft in the Ormoc landing, a convoy of 150 ships bypasses most of the Philippine Islands and heads toward one of the largest of the group, Mindoro. Sailing almost always in sight of land where the enemy had air bases, the convoy is subjected to sporadic air attacks for 2 days. "250 enemy planes were destroyed during the whole operation. Entering the Sulu Sea after a trip of 600 miles, shore bombardment begins at 07:05 hours, 15th December, lasting 20 minutes. Another Jap air attack. One of our warships is hit. Veteran troops without previous amphibious experience hit several beaches on the southwest coast of the island, meeting no opposition. Principal objective was the airstrip at San Jose. Forward elements penetrate more than a mile inland within 90 minutes after the first landing. A second wave hits the beach. In going from Leyte to Mindoro, our troops pass from a wet to a dry season. Still no opposition. It's reported that the island is apparently lightly garrisoned, but its nearness to southern Luzon poses a constant threat to our invading forces. The troops move inland and advance toward San Jose. A Jap barracks is approached cautiously by men of the 2nd Battalion. Following a narrow gauge railroad into San Jose, the railroad connects the sugar central at San Jose with Kamanawit Point Wharf, one of our landing areas. Ships disgorge tanks, bulldozers, tractors, and other heavy equipment. Supplies needed for building and improving airfields and for the advance up the island. An aviation engineer battalion launches construction work at San Jose Field. Airfields on southwest Mindoro will place enemy installations on Luzon, southern Formosa, as well as those on the South China coast within effective range of Far Eastern Air Force bombers. .4 inches of rain in 24 hours, ending 9th December, flood a regimental bivouac area of the 92nd Division at a point 17 airline miles south of Bologna. The course of the Idice River, which runs north and south past Bologna, is normally wide, dry, and rock-covered. Bivouacking here, the regiment was caught unprepared by the downpour. A final check reveals very small losses of materiel and no casualties. While average rainfall in autumn for this vicinity is 18 inches, by early December, the 5th Army front had received 25 inches of rain. On 10th December, Lieutenant General Lucian K. Truscott, Jr., newly appointed commander of the 5th Army, is greeted by Major General Jeffrey Keyes on the Apennine front below Bologna. Most recently with the 6th Corps in France, General Truscott returns to the theater of operations in which he won laurels at Anzio. Through a shift in the Mediterranean High Command, Lieutenant General Mark W. Clark succeeds Field Marshal Alexander as Commander-in-Chief of the Allied 15th Army Group. With General Truscott at his side, General Clark bids farewell on 15th December to the staff, officers, and men of the 5th Army. He had commanded it since its activation on 5th January 1943. Now he leaves to take command of all Allied forces in Italy, including both the 5th and the British 8th Army. See's German newsreel film designed to rally the German people behind an all-out program of labor recruiting initiated last summer. Effective 1st September, all theaters except movie houses are closed by Joseph Goebbels, who has now received the title of Reich Plenipotentiary for total war. An indication of Nazi utilization of all available resources. Trolley cars marked City Freight Service are used for goods instead of passengers. Confident slogans to maintain and stimulate German labor morale. Addressing a rally of armament workers in the Rhineland district, Goebbels declares, "Before we admit the enemy to German soil and submit ourselves to his will, we will first work our hands bloody and work to our last breath." Women under 50 are subject to a labor draft. Even men and women over 65 are being assigned fairly light manufacturing at home. German miners coming off shift. They are volunteering after work to dig trenches and throw up earthworks. It's presumed that these scenes were photographed in East Prussia, where activity of this type was intensified as the Red Army drew near in October of last year. These films from the cameras of captured Nazi combat photographers portray the initial hours of Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt's surprise advance. After exploratory thrusts on 16th December, the campaign gains full momentum through the early morning of the next day. The German captions seized with this film identify the breakthrough point shown here as Ligneville, Belgium, just south of Malmedy. The Nazis claim extensive destruction and considerable booty as their blitz roars through the Eifel area and into the valleys of the Ardennes. German High Command has committed at least 20 full-strength divisions to the winter offensive. In support of the ground operations, the Luftwaffe is employed in its largest effort since D-Day, strafing and bombing our troops and convoys. Again referring to the German captions, they claim that an American column consisting of tanks, armored cars, and sundry service vehicles was wiped out as the Nazis began this drive before Malmedy, that most of the Americans were surprised at their guns and annihilated. Later, reports from our command revealed that the Germans are employed captured Sherman tanks and American jeeps and trucks. Also, specially assigned Nazis wearing U.S. uniforms are discovered infiltrating behind our lines. The following scenes were listed as morale pictures by the German cameraman. Captured American cigarettes being distributed to panzer units. For the most part, von Rundstedt's divisions are comprised of men transferred from other sectors of the Western Front. But it's felt that at least some of the approximately 200,000 troops were drawn from farther afield, from Norway and the Eastern Front. Signal Corps films show U.S. troops on the southern wing of the American First Army forced back along the fluid front as the carefully planned offensive achieves initial surprise. On 17th December, infantry units move out of Werzfeld, Belgium toward Elsenborn. Later, regrouped American forces are to hold off a whole Panzer army in the Elsenborn salient south of Monschau. At a fuel dump on the road to Stavelo, gas, diesel oil, and kerosene are burned as the Nazis advance on the town in the early stages of the drive. Pillboxes are demolished. Combat engineers place 500 pounds of TNT inside one of the German-built fortifications. The pillbox is completely destroyed by the explosion. Trees are notched for the placement of TNT to form roadblocks. The enemy is attacking over ground where he made his blitz in 1940. The rapid advance creates isolated pockets of American resistance, but the pockets become defensive wedges with roadblocks and mines contributing to an overall holding maneuver. Engineers mine roads on the outskirts of Elsenborn. The beginning of the hurried rallying of our forces to stop the panzers. The breakthrough and fan-out tactics of the Germans have enabled them to create a salient which extends 51 by 40 miles at its greatest dimensions. Allied troops converging on the northern rim of the Belgian Bulge are commanded by Field Marshal Sir Bernard L. Montgomery. Lieutenant General Omar N. Bradley leads the forces on the south side of the salient. Participating troops include the veteran 82nd Airborne Division, rushed to Belgium from a rest camp near Reims, France. In a three-day battle, the 82nd retakes 8 towns, captures nearly 1,500 prisoners, and kills 1,860 Germans. 1st Division infantry and tank destroyers move up to counter the 12th SS Panzer Division's drive before Buchenbach. Meanwhile, 1st Division patrols searched the woods near Eupen, Belgium, where Nazi paratroops landed on the first days of the battle. According to intelligence reports, they were expected to work south from Eupen, cut the road to Verviers in the Hertogen Forest, and there meet with German elements coming up from the breakthrough point. These forces never arrived, and the parachute troops are gradually rounded up. One of the parachute packing cases, and a snow cape of the type widely used by the Germans on the snow-covered Belgian front. An Arctic skyway for sending U.S. Lend-Lease planes to Russia. This map traces the route from Great Falls, Montana, U.S. terminus, to Siberia via Edmonton, Watson Lake, Whitehorse, Fairbanks, and Nome. Edmonton, capital of Alberta, first big Canadian link in the chain of air bases known as the Northwest Staging Route. To sustain operation, food, furniture, and other items are flown to various key points. The route is to Russia what flying the hump has been to China. North to the Yukon. Originating as part of Canada's wartime airway expansion, the route was offered free to the U.S. as an airway to Alaska. One of more than 20 air bases and emergency landing fields. Here, RCAF crews complete installations. Canada's investment in U.S.-built facilities is over $39 million. Speeding extension of the airway to meet Russia-bound traffic. The Arctic route was chosen in 1935 after years of pioneering by Canadian bush pilots. Operations are under the 7th Ferrying Group and the Alaskan position of the Air Transport Command. U.S. Ambassador to Canada Ray Atherton, greeted by Lieutenant Colonel Fagan and RCAF Air Vice Marshal Lawrence. Planes for Russia at Fairbanks, Alaska. The first Russia-bound planes flew over the Arctic Airway in September 1942. As of December 1944, more than 5,000 planes have gone to the Soviet Union via this route. Veteran combat pilots of the Red Air Force, ready to take over from American pilots for the last lap of the flight to Siberia. Off to a base in Siberia, 540 miles from Fairbanks, or more than 2,000 miles from the assembly line. British troops on 30th November advance on Pinway, 174 miles north of Mandalay. Major General Francis W. Festing is in command. The Chinese 155 battery is commanded by an American liaison officer. A Scottish unit moves up. The retreating enemy elected to fight for Pinway, and the stubborn resistance cost many Japanese lives. British sappers reenact discovery of an improvised Jap road mine south of Pinway. A small board is found beneath a loose covering of twigs and earth. The mine is a pressure type with a 2-pound charge of picric acid. The striker is a 10-penny nail. It and the coil springs are the only metal used. Another mine with the same charge was activated by a tripwire. To facilitate supply for Allied columns pursuing the retreating Japs, engineers repair a section of the Mogong-Mandalay Railroad leading south from Pinway. As the Allies leave the mountainous ridges of North Burma and enter the Central Plain, they regain control of north-south lines of communications for the first time in 3 years. In mid-December, construction continues on the Lido Road, which has been taking 10,000 tons of cargo monthly to the North Burma front. As Allied columns drive for a juncture with the Burma Road, extension of supply routes keeps pace with offensive operations. The American-operated Bengal-Assam Railroad, a feeding line for the Lido Road, is now carrying more than double the pre-1944 tonnage for the Manipur and Northern Assam stations. Engineers prepare for heavier traffic on the Lido Road. American and Chinese engineers cooperate on surveying, clearing, grubbing, and grading for this secondary road. On 14th December, Brigadier General Lewis A. Pick, Lido Road supervisor, arrives at a road construction headquarters. He accompanies Major General W.E.R. Covell, commanding General SOS India-Burma Theater, on an inspection tour. Further east, near Michinaw on 18th December, troopers of a cavalry regiment with all battle equipment packed on mules leave Camp Landis. This Mars Task Force unit headed south for Bamo crosses the 25-ton ponton bridge recently erected across the Irrawaddy River. At Bamo, shortly after its capture, General Sun Li-jen, commanding the Chinese First Army, accompanies General Sultan on an inspection tour. A light tank knocked out by Chinese gunners is among the Jap equipment viewed. A Jap caliber 50 anti-aircraft gun is examined at a collection depot. Jap gas masks are among the trophies. Seized German film claiming to show Nazi action in the Baltic area. A Mark V Panther tank. Apparently a 75mm gun self-propelled on a tank chassis. One-ton half-track reconnaissance cars. Probably a 75mm assault gun. A Mark III chassis propels this gun. A synthetic sequence edited by the Nazis to show how a Russian T-34 tank is trapped. The non-com is ready with a Panzerfaust, equivalent of our bazooka. A knocked-out T-34 tank, which may not be the same as previously seen, since here it is close to a damaged Russian SP gun. The Nazis identify these as Stukas dive-bombing Warsaw during the repression of the Polish underground last fall. Scene of a diving Stuka, first used in a Nazi film on the Battle of France. Hits on Warsaw last year are intercut with material filmed 4 years before. Inside liberated Paris, last vestiges of Nazi occupation are removed. Sections of the French capital's principal subway stations had been converted into factories making airplane parts for the Luftwaffe. Workmen break up the concrete, which the Germans spread over 6 miles of the rail as flooring for the underground war plant. On the station platforms is the machinery used in this unique aircraft factory 300 feet below the street level. Parisian machinists dismantle the equipment, which bears markings indicating U.S. design. The principal plants were at a point where three main lines meet at the northeastern outskirts of Paris. Once these workmen finish clearing the tracks and hauling out the cement and stone, normal operation will be restored on the Paris lines. The First Army front during the hours preceding the opening of the German counteroffensive. This action took place at Görsnick, Germany, 1,500 yards west of Düren. Youthful Nazi soldiers surrender. German rear guards were being swept back toward the Ruhr River, and Lieutenant General Hodges' forces had opened strong attacks north and south of the Ruhr dams. Also enveloped in the pre-counteroffensive drive was the German town of Esch, 2½ miles from Düren. Here, men of the 9th Infantry Division captured two German 120mm mortars undamaged. The smooth-bore, high-angle firing, muzzle-loaded weapon is carried on its own trailer. Bipod, mortar tube, and base plate comprise the essential sections of the German 120. The base plate has 4 carrying handles and deep ribs which dig into the ground. A socket is provided in the base plate for inserting the tube. A chain and spring at the bottom of the bipod help absorb shock. Saddle and clamp are used to affix the mortar tube. This is the type of sight mechanism used with the German mortar. It fits into place on the bipod as shown. The bipod has an elevation screw with a crank handle. A hand wheel is employed with the traversing screw. This cross-leveling adjustment is another feature of the 120 mortar, which is fired by a lanyard-type mechanism. Demonstrating the weapon's recoil. Comparing the 120mm shell with an 81mm projectile. Our 81mm mortar and the captured German 120, which will now be used by American troops. At Geriensweiler, a knocked-out King Tiger tank is put back into working order. With the help of a wrecker, the turret is forced into line by men of Company B, 129th Ordnance Maintenance Battalion, 7th Armored Division. The King Tiger tank weighs approximately 72 tons. It has 34-inch wide treads which spread the great weight over a large area. Top speed, 20 miles an hour. Armor up to 6 inches thick. It mounts the vaunted 88mm gun whose barrel is more than 21 feet long. The rebuilt tank will be used to familiarize our troops with the enemy weapon. Planes scour the December breakthrough front and points behind the lines, pulverizing the enemy's supply columns. For 8 days, bad weather shielded the Nazi counteroffensive, and von Rundstedt advanced free from air interference. Now the full power of every Allied air force in Western Europe is thrown against the Germans. Flak catches some of our aircraft, which leave a smoke trail as they fall. Incidents in the defense of Bastogne. Men of the 101st Airborne Division begin their march to the outskirts of the vital road junction town. The U.S. command had given one order: hold Bastogne at all costs. To this end, the 4th Armored Division also moves up, and along with other units, make sure that besieged Bastogne holds firm. Supplies for the Bastogne defenders brought in by trains of C-47s from bases in Britain and France. A total of 850 missions are flown by the transport planes to provide the isolated troops with ammunition, food, and medicines. Prisoners are marched by as the planes arrive. This airdrop is in the nick of time. During the first days of the battle, the Germans had captured our garrison's complete surgical outfit, as well as a quartermaster and ordnance unit. By 28th December, General Patton's forces had succeeded in lifting the siege at Bastogne. The 82nd Airborne Division, which defended positions around Stavelot and Stoumont when the Germans broke through, is ready for new thrusts. Brief services are held for men of the 504th Parachute Infantry before they go into line. The 82nd participated in the Netherlands campaign last September and earlier saw action in Sicily, Italy, and Normandy. German heavy equipment knocked out by the 82nd without support of artillery or tanks. Many towns south of Stavelo fall to the 82nd as they help compress the Belgian Bulge. On the southern side of the salient, a march through snow-covered forests and over steep hills is made by a battalion of the 35th Infantry Division. This maneuver in the Sauer River section is aimed at outflanking the town of Beit-Lange on the Belgian-Luxembourg border. The trek coincides with the halting of von Rundstedt's progress along the entire front. Lieutenant Colonel Gordon Seagrave returns to the Burmese village of Nam Kam on 25th January, 10 days after its capture by Chinese troops. When the Japs overran Burma in 1942, the renowned Burma surgeon already had spent 20 years in Nam Kam as a Baptist medical missionary. In his fight against filth and disease, he built the hospital which he now inspects and taught native girls to be skilled nurses. During the 3 years preceding his return to Nam Kam, Colonel Seagrave and many of his nurses ministered to Allied troops, fighting to rid Burma territory of the invader. The Colonel's friendship extends throughout Burma's racial groups. Burmese, Kachin, Shans, Karans, and members of smaller tribes all have benefited from his medical work. The local peoples joined the returning hospital staff to celebrate a return which had been eagerly awaited in Nam Kam. British films have continued Allied pressure on the enemy's western flank in Burma. Naval units pound the southern tip of Myeban on the morning of 12th January in preparation for a landing. Sloops fire salvo after salvo from their 4-inch guns as aircraft bomb and strafe Japanese positions inland. Objective of the operation is to cut the only road and river escape routes of enemy forces pulling back along the south coast of Burma. Commando forces storm ashore at Hunter's Bay, 32 miles east-southeast of Akyab. A beach mine is encountered. Besides mines, opposition includes artillery fire, mortars, and small arms fire. The first wave of British commandos lands in shallow water, but due to shifting tide, the second wave has to struggle through waist-deep water to reach shore. The attempt to establish a beachhead is successful. Navy films of powerful United States Pacific Fleet units deep within the enemy's inner defense zone. Carrier-based Navy planes attack Jap shipping and installations at Luzon, Formosa, and French Indochina, while B-29 strike at the Japanese mainland. Near Manila, Jap ships bringing supplies to Luzon Island are hit by Navy bombers and fighters. Fires raging on bombed airfields and military installations. action coordinated with the invasion of Luzon, screening destroyers escort carriers of Admiral William F. Halsey's Third Fleet on a strike at the southeast coast of Indochina. A Navy crew rescues a flyer who crashed in the rough sea. Planes take off on a sweep along the Indochina coast. 3 enemy convoys are virtually destroyed, while many other ships in the harbors are sunk or damaged. Our planes sank 41 vessels, totaling about 127,000 tons, and damaged 28 others, totaling about 70,000 tons. Hellcat fighter planes swept over Indochina itself, shooting down 10 enemy aircraft. Shore installations at Saigon, Cam Bay, Kat Lai, Kwangan were also heavily damaged. At Saigon, oil storage facilities were destroyed, and large fires were started in the Navy Yard. Coordinated with these attacks, Army B-29s bombed Japanese aircraft factories. Target is an engine plant and final assembly plant of the Kawase Aircraft Company, just outside of Osaka on the main Japanese island of Honshu. All planes returned safely. C-54 lands on the Mediterranean island of Malta, bringing U.S. staff officers to a joint assemblage of Allied military leaders. Leaving the plane, Fleet Admiral Ernest J. King, Chief of Naval Operations. The welcoming dignitaries include W.A. Harriman, American Ambassador to the Soviet Union. General of the Army George C. Marshall and Lieutenant General Brayon B. Somerville, greeted by Field Marshal Wilson, head of the British Joint Staff Mission at Washington, and Mr. Harriman. In advance of the Crimea Conference, meetings with the British are held at Malta, attended by the American Chief of Staff and the Commanding General of Army Service Forces. The Commander-in-Chief of the United States Fleet will discuss naval operations with British representatives. These Anglo-American discussions pave the way for meetings with the Russian staff and lead to complete accord on combined military plans for final defeat of the common enemy. The conferees include Field Marshal Alexander and Sir Alan Brooke, Admiral Sir Andrew Cunningham, Air Marshal Sir Charles Portal, and Field Marshal Wilson. In the harbor outside Malta, Prime Minister Churchill salutes from a British man-of-war as he greets President Roosevelt on the bridge of an American warship. They'll meet with Premier Stalin at Yalta in the Crimea. The town of Yalta lies at the foot of the mountains in a bay on the Black Sea. This ancient Russian Riviera resort is 30 miles east of Sevastopol, where a Liberty ship is now unloading Signal Corps equipment for delivery to conference headquarters. A complete communication system will be set up to enable the Anglo-American Soviet leaders to maintain contact with their respective capitals. The truck convoys climb through the mountains, typical of this section of the Russian Crimea. The conference takes place in Livadia Palace, built in 1911 as a summer home by Tsar Nicholas II. Here, quarters were provided for many of the conferees. Signal Corps crews prepare for a load of governmental and military communications in addition to the business of the conference itself. At Yalta Airport, the incoming procession of American and British delegates begins. Secretary of State Edward R. Stettinius, Jr., greeted by V.M. Molotov, People's Commissar for Foreign Affairs. Anthony Eden, British Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs. The Prime Minister. The President meets various Russian dignitaries. Inspecting the Russian Honor Guard. The Roosevelt-Stalin-Churchill talks begin Sunday morning, 4th February. The Russian Premier arrives at Livadia Palace for the first meeting. Prime Minister Churchill enters. The leaders of the 3 Allied nations seated around the conference table with their aides. In talks extending through 8 days, they make decisions aimed at sealing the doom of Nazi Germany and German militarism. It was announced that the meetings resulted in closer coordination of the military effort of the three allies than ever before. Plans were made for Germany's occupation and control, as well as for maintaining order and establishing popular governments in liberated countries. The statement was signed by the three leaders on 11th February. For the benefit of photographers, a between-meetings gathering of the dignitaries in the courtyard of WWII Palace. The Crimea Statement also calls for a United Nations Security Conference to be held at San Francisco on 25th April. British films of Coastal Command mosquito bombers on January raids attacking enemy shipping in fjords along the Norwegian coast. Tanks of the 7th Armored Division converging on Saint-Vite, 4 miles from the Reich border. Pursuing remnants of von Rundstedt's armies in the Ardennes, General Hodge's forces plod through snow and across ice-covered hills. 38 days after the German breakthrough, the enemy has been driven back virtually to his starting point. Saint-Vite, in the northeastern corner of the Bulge, is the last important road junction on the Nazi escape route. 7th Division infantry troops wearing camouflage dress take cover in the snow near the besieged town. On the outskirts of Saint-Vite, armored support for the infantry. The town is entered on 23rd January. German losses in tanks and assault guns are upwards of 600 as Allied troops begin new drives north and east of Saint-Vite. Advancing behind the fleeing Nazis, our forces complete straightening of the line before the West Wall prior to new breakthroughs into German territory. An 11-hour barrage by 1,400 guns opens Field Marshal Montgomery's February offensive east of Nijmegen. At 10:30 hours, 8th February, infantry of the 1st Canadian Army jumps off on a front between the Maas and the Rhine. In the path of the drive is the Reichswald, its natural barriers strengthened by a belt of Siegfried-Line pillboxes which run through the forest. Thick minefields and anti-tank ditches also confront the troops under General H.D.G. Creerar's command. A pillbox is knocked out. The main attack shown in these British films is spearheaded directly toward Kleve, at the northeastern end of the Reich Fault. According to intelligence reports, the Nazis are forced to bring up divisions from the Cologne Plain to meet this latest thrust. The Canadian 1st, one of the armies of Field Marshal Montgomery's 21st Army Group, is disclosed to be about 75% British. Inundations in the Rhine lowlands, coupled with terrain made muddy by an unexpected thaw, are among the great handicaps to the advance. However, the front, which originally extended 4 miles, is gradually expanded. More than a dozen towns are captured during the first 2 days of the Rhine push. Heavy rainfall floods the streets of several villages. By 11th February, Kleve is reached. Kleve is about 7 miles beyond the border inside northwestern Germany. Enemy resistance is methodically broken down by infantry units with tank support. Had a pre-war population of 22,000, and as of 12th February, is the largest German town captured by the British and Canadians in their drive southeast toward the Ruhr. The advance nets 5,000 prisoners in 5 days. Below Kleve, Britons and Canadians drive on Goch, junction for roads running into the industrial district west of the Rhine. 81mm mortar crews supporting the infantry early in February during the elimination of the German salient in the vicinity of Ogno. Company M, 3rd Battalion, 313th Regiment, 79th Division, supplements its ammunition stock with German 80mm shells for use in the 81mm mortar. According to the company commander, the difference of 1 millimeter in the tube of the mortar makes accuracy of fire impossible. The objectives are enemy strong points across the Moder River. Demonstrating detection of the German non-metallic Topf mine, 44th Division engineers with the 7th Army try out 2 sweepers. The SCR 625F, which responds to metallic mines, shows no needle registration, although actually over the top mine. When the ANPRS number 1 encounters the same suspicious spot, its meter indicates the presence of the mine. Probing and disarming of the all-plastic wood and glass anti-tank mines are next shown. Last November, a German field manual dealing with the Topf mine was located and reprinted by the 15th Corps Engineer Intelligence Section. Discovery of the mine in the 44th Division sector offered the first opportunity for complete analysis. Previously, some of the mines had been found in a German stockpile, but they were minus the igniters. Here, the igniter is shown being removed. And next, the detonator. The German manual contains reference to locating of the Topf mine by their own troops. Mention is made of a specially adapted mine detector, Stuttgart 43, which responds to a mixture placed in the soil covering each Topf mine. This mixture is labeled tar sand, camouflage sand. Air Corps films of Nazi planes being shot down by Mustangs and Thunderbolts, which provide protective cover for fortresses and liberators on sorties deep into industrial Germany. Air Force fighters strafe rail targets. preparing to respray Saipan with a DDT solution. Men of the 743rd Medical Sanitary Company load 5-gallon tins of the Army's insecticide. Soon after initial landings here last summer, an oily solution of DDT was sprayed from the air over jungle and swamp. The resulting extermination of disease-bearing mosquitoes and flies was commended by Brigadier General Raymond W. Bliss, Assistant Surgeon General. He said, "Now, if one mosquito is located, we consider it comparable to finding a four-leaf clover." Respraying is necessary because the toxic effect of the insecticide wears off about every 4 months. After being poured into drums, the DDT solution is pumped into a converted belly tank inside the plane. Valve and pipe connect the tank with sprayer beneath the plane. As the plane hedge hops over the breeding places of malaria and dengue-bearing insects, DDT is sprayed in a pattern as regular as that of a lawnmower. Synthesized 70 years ago by a German chemist, DDT's possibilities were not exploited until it was tested by the Army in 1942, and then placed in immediate production for military use. The first convoy over the new Stillwell Road approaches its final destination 24 days after leaving Lido, India. Although twice attacked by enemy planes, the 6-mile column of trucks makes the 1,044-mile journey to Kunming, China without suffering damage. On 4th February, the first trucks from the outside world since 1942 reach the city's gates. The convoy halts outside the West Gate entrance while General Pick and his aides proceed to the speaker's platform. He's introduced by Major General J.L. Huang.
Its first convoy over this road, the governor and the commanding general of the Generalissimo's headquarters is now presenting to General Pick a banner on which is scrawled these 4 letters, 胜利之路, which means the road to victory. General Pick. General Pick is going to say a few words. General Long, as convoy commander and on behalf of the officers and men of the first convoy over the Lido-Burma Road to Kunming, China, I accept this banner in their behalf. It should be placed in a conspicuous place where all of the people who are involved with transportation over this great road may see it and be inspired to carry on and deliver many, many more convoys into China.
After the ceremony, General Pick and his party leave the stand with Lung Yun, governor of the province of Yunnan. At the West Gate entrance, the ribbon across the road is cut. The convoy rolls into the city. Firecrackers and cheers greet the trucks as they pass through the streets. Opening of the Stillwell Road means that aircraft will be partly relieved of the task of carrying gasoline and trucks over the hump to China, leaving more airspace available for other vital war materials. The road's engineers figure on 60,000 tons a month of all types of munitions and supplies being carried over the new land route. American troops pushing the Japs back in northern Luzon pass wrecked Japanese tanks destroyed in an unsuccessful Jap counterattack at Binalonan, Luzon. At least 20 enemy tanks were knocked out in this action. A Jap who tried to commit suicide with his hand grenade, killed before he could pull the pin. The drive south on Manila sees heavy fighting at Kami Ling by units of the 14th Corps. Advance elements fanned out south and east on the Lingayen Plain leading to the Philippine capital. Kami Ling is an important communication center in northern Tarlac province. The troops push forward along the highways through Kami Ling and Tarlac on the road to Manila. Continuing their progress southward, troops of the 14th Corps bring up artillery to attack the Clark Field area, which is subjected to heavy shelling before tanks and infantrymen move in. Clark Field littered with abandoned enemy aircraft and equipment. Troops remove mines and booby traps planted by the Japs in many of the 12 airstrips comprising the Clark Field area. General MacArthur at Clark Field, 26 January, shortly after our troops had driven the last Japs from the sector. General MacArthur visits the Filipino cemetery at Camp O'Donnell, terminating point of the death march from Bataan. The camp was captured in the push on Clark Field and nearby Fort Stotzenburg. Preparations are made for an attack on Hill 70, strongly fortified Japanese position barring the way to Manila. This sector was honeycombed with Jap pillboxes and dugouts. Mortars, flamethrowers, and grenades are used to root out the entrenched Japs. An explosive charge in a 5-gallon gasoline can is improvised to blast an enemy position. A second front is set up on Luzon. Tanks and infantry of the 8th Army's 11th Corps, which were put ashore in a surprise landing northwest of Subic Bay, push inland in a flanking movement on Manila. Some resistance is encountered from a battalion of Japanese entrenched in the hills about 8 miles inland from Subic Bay, near Mount Aming. Japs, unable to contain our advance on Manila, set fire to the area before retreating. A third front strikes Luzon from the south. Paratroopers of the 11th Airborne Division, attached to Lieutenant General Robert L. Eichelberger's 8th Army, aid the swift advance of the American troops in the drive on Manila by seizing Togatai Ridge, a road junction in the southern edge of the Cavite province. Capture of Togatai Ridge will give our troops dominant positions overlooking Cavite and the southern approaches to Manila. Manila, a city in ruins devastated by fire, shelling, and demolition. Roads and fields are strewn with new type Jap mines. House-to-house fighting in the Ermita district. Mortar observers direct fire on Jap positions as infantry and tanks advance against Intramuros, the old Spanish walled city. .37mm anti-tank guns provide covering fire for tanks and infantry. Flamethrowers burn out Jap pillboxes. Heavy fighting at Harrison Park and Rizal Stadium, southern Manila. Troops of the 2nd Squadron, 5th Cavalry, 1st Cavalry Division dismounted, and units of a tank battalion close in on the last organized Jap resistance in this section of the city. Battle of the Ballpark. Infantry and tanks move across a Manila ballpark against Japs in the stands and dugouts. The Japs, estimated to number over 100, were equipped with machine guns and knee mortars. Frontal attack proving too costly, troops attempt to outflank the enemy. Tanks close in to wipe out the last remaining Japs in the ballpark. Artillery of the 136th Field Artillery Battalion, 37th Division, opens fire on Jap positions across the Pasig River. Public buildings are fortified by last-ditch Jap defenders. American artillery demolishes a large ice plant. For 3 days, the Japs had used the ice house as a storage depot, shelter, and base for sniping. A cannon company of the 145th Infantry set the building ablaze with 105mm shells and leveled it in 1 hour. Finding the range on the walls of Intramuros, which are about 500 yards from our gun positions. Some of the walls are 40 feet thick. The YMCA building is destroyed by artillery fire. Jap troops observed in one of the archways of the walled city. Later, these archways were destroyed by our 105mm shells. Japs, driven from their positions by concentrated artillery fire, dash for safety across an open plaza. Navy films of Task Force 58 under Vice Admiral Mark A. Mitcher as it proceeds through heavy seas on its way toward the Tokyo area. Objective is to tie down the Japanese Air Force so that it can't intercept the large force of transports, landing craft, and supply ships heading northward for landings on Iwo Jima. 16th February. Pilots leave the briefing room on their way to the planes. Takeoffs are imperiled by the heavy seas. "1,500 planes take part in the attack. Heavy storm clouds blanket the Tokyo area. Mount Fujiyama. One of our planes strafes a ship in the harbor. Comes an enemy interceptor. Japanese aircraft factories are struck heavily. The attack continues for more than 9 hours. The next day, it's followed up with another attack lasting more than 8 hours. Throughout the attacks, the enemy offers only slight resistance. Our losses amount to 9 fighter planes and 4 pilots. 4 of Japan's largest and most important engine and assembly plants received devastating blows during the 2-day strike. strafing planes caught on the airfields. About 2,000 are found on the ground. Altogether, 659 enemy planes are destroyed in the air and on the ground. While the enemy is being wiped out at the northern end of EO, supplies pour into the southern beaches. By 13th March, our casualties total more than 18,000, including almost 4,000 dead. Enemy dead total nearly 20,000. Evacuating wounded men to a hospital ship. Mopping up operations continue to unearth Japanese hiding in the many caves dug in the cliffs and sides of volcanoes. 2 Japs were killed in front of this cave trying to fight their way out. The remaining 3 are taken prisoner after hiding 10 days. They appear weak from lack of water. After stripping and searching them, military police marched them to the stockade for questioning. Many of the Japanese gun installations are in caves 30 to 40 feet deep. The small exposed part blends so well with the surroundings that they can't be discovered until they open fire. Even then, the heaviest bombs, including 12,000-pound AP, frequently have no effect. Many of the emplacements are so situated that they could not be hit from the sea or the air. Infantry had to wipe them out. A B-29 makes an emergency landing. Returning from a mission, the bomber would have had to land in the ocean if EO hadn't been taken. North of Trier in the lower Moselle Valley, units of General Patton's Third Army battle their way through the Eifel Hills, straightening a line running 35 miles up to the fallen enemy base of Prüm. Early in March, the 11th Armored Division, in conjunction with the 4th Infantry Division, pushes forward preparatory to a jump-off from the Kill River above the Moselle to the Rhine. German positions in the hills above Trier are brought under fire. This offensive, which began late in February when armor and infantry crossed the Moselle and began clearing out the Moselle-Saar Triangle, is to result in the collapse of last enemy territory west of the Rhine. Nazi prisoners seek cover from the fires of German batteries. They were captured at Ost, Germany, northeast of Prüm. This action is well beyond the Siegfried Line, which the Third Army has smashed at all points north of Trier. The drive to Cologne. On the approaches to Germany's 4th largest city, the enemy had prepared huge roadblocks to be rolled into position when First Army troops struck from the northern and southern outskirts. On 5th March, men of the 3rd Armored Division eliminate pockets of resistance in the suburban towns of Pulheim and Bokelmund. A total of 15 villages around Cologne are taken in the advance on the city. The few remaining civilians seek the shelter of our lines as street fighting intensifies. The troops under Major General Maurice Rose quickly batter down the spotty opposition to their penetration of the Cologne city limits. Augmenting the 2 First Army units which had crossed the Ruhr at Düren, the 3rd Army spearheaded the drive due east, reaching the Rhine downstream from Cologne before turning south for this rush toward the city. The streets of Cologne are not far ahead. tanks and infantry press forward on the road leading directly into the heart of the besieged metropolis. The cathedral's spires gradually loom closer as the advancing column continues its uninterrupted approach. There is some machine gun fire and occasional shells, but little concerted resistance. At the underpass into the city, the Nazis have set up a barricade consisting of disabled streetcars and heavy iron beams. E and A companies of the 36th Armored Infantry Regiment are first to reach this roadblock, and they rapidly remove its many components. A tank dozer is utilized to pull out the streetcars blocking the underpass. In 45 minutes, the barrier has been removed and armor rolls into the city proper. The Germans are holding out in various strong points and bomb-shattered buildings. Most of the opposition comes from regular troops. Our units report no house-to-house resistance by the Volkssturm. The enemy is pursued from street to street. Those attempting to flee in motor cars are repeatedly fired upon. Snipers are routed from their positions. The Jerry tank suffers a direct hit, and the crew leaps from the flames. Concussion rocks the handheld camera with its telephoto lens. Nearby, the shell of the cathedral is still standing, almost intact except for holes in the roof. The edifice received no direct bomb hits in approximately 25 all-out raids on Cologne. Inside, the 700-year-old cathedral is bare, its religious relics having been removed to places of safety. 15 miles south of Cologne, the First Army captures Bonn. The enemy barely had time to blow up the span across the Rhine. 2 Nazi engineers were trapped on the bridge after placing the charge. Even as the 1st Division takes Bonn, the 9th Division, which has been fighting at its side through 2 years of far-flung campaigning, smashes into Bad Godesberg. This city, 12 miles south of Bonn, is captured on the morning of 8th March. The normal population was 23,000. In 1938, at Godesberg, Hitler and Neville Chamberlain met in this building prior to the Munich Conference, at which the dismemberment of Czechoslovakia was formally ratified. Establishing the Remagen bridgehead, vehicles in long line move up to the span named after General Ludendorff. Nazi plans called for demolition of this bridge between Remagen on the west bank and Erpel on the east. But on 7th March, 9th Armored Division patrols removed the charges before serious damage could be done, and we had a bridge intact over the Rhine. Tanks and infantry crossed to capture Erpel and surrounding high ground before pushing on inland. The bridge's railroad tracks have been planked over for vehicular traffic. Our ACAC opposes persistent enemy attempts to dive bomb the Ludendorff Bridge. The bridgehead rapidly expands. This marks the first breaching of the Rhine River line since Napoleon crossed in 1805. "50 miles north of the Remagen bridgehead, air and ground assaults marked the 9th Army's drive to the Rhine opposite Dusseldorf. A tank of the 2nd Armored Division opens fire. Lieutenant General Simpson's troops drive closer to the remainder of Field Marshal Montgomery's 21st Army Group, the British 2nd Army and the Canadian 1st. Striking from the Neuss area, where 3 bridges have been blown, the 9th Army gains control of the 13 miles of the Rhine's west bank. Firing on enemy barges in the Rhine before Dusseldorf. In the meantime, the 35th Infantry Division, after taking the town of Geltern, Germany, moves forward to make contact with British units advancing down from the north. Men of the 35th meet Tommies of a Welsh division. Bicycles are used by elements of the 84th Infantry Division along roads opposite Duisburg. The two-wheelers are abandoned as they strike out across somewhat rugged Rhineland terrain. A combined Anglo-American drive further north is reducing the enemy's west bank bridgehead opposite Wesel, paving the way for new Rhine crossings north of the Ruhr. Tanks participate in the routing of last enemy forces fleeing to the east bank. The battle for the town of Gaynent, due west of Duisburg. Less than 3 weeks after this action, the 21st Army Group is across the northern Rhine. War dogs trained at 9th Air Force headquarters help military police carry out their security, protective, and rescue duties. The animal schooling period lasts from 4 to 6 weeks, during which time they are taught obedience, suspicion of strangers, and attack against resisting and armed persons. Striking always with the right or weapon arm, the dog will attack anyone upon whom they're turned loose or who actively tries to defend himself. However, they will not maul a person who remains still and offers no resistance. Each dog is assigned to an MP, and an effort is made to continue the man-dog combination once it is established. The dogs are confined at all times when not on actual duty, are fed only once a day, and are shown no particular kindness over and above the friendliness which develops between the man-dog team. Under this treatment, war dogs become highly vicious. Therefore, they are always worked on a leash, except in emergencies. The diet of the dogs is supposed to contain 2 pounds of meat per day, but it's not always possible to get this food in the theater of war. However, the dogs are well fed and cared for. Any injury or illness is promptly attended to by soldier veterinaries. The dogs, with their keen sense of smell and hearing, are particularly valuable in trailing fugitives, lost personnel, or escaped prisoners of war through woods or countryside. They not only enable the MP to cover more ground in patrolling, but help him to guard and protect the area with greater efficiency. When buildings collapse during bombing or shelling, the dogs are used to scent out people trapped beneath the debris and to aid in the rescue work. The animals quickly and surely lead rescuers to the victims of such raids and are responsible for saving many lives. Trainers write letters to the dog's former masters. British civilians donated their pets to a training school operated in England, and the school supplies the animals to the Allied military. The war dogs are proving a great help in sentry duty. The MP leads the tethered dog along the downwind side of the area. If an intruder is present upwind from the team, the dog betrays his presence by becoming nervous or barking. Favorite among the dogs is the highly intelligent German Shepherd. Navy films of fleet operations during the Okinawa campaign. Elements of the Fast Carrier Task Force send aircraft aloft for strikes in support of American invasion forces. Shooting down Japanese planes, including suiciders of the Kamikaze Corps. Strafing Japanese shipping and other targets. In a broadcasted statement 10th July, Secretary of the Navy Forrestal said, for more than 18 months, the Navy's Fast Carrier Task Force has kept the Japanese air forces off balance. The Navy has sunk more than 250 major Japanese warships and hundreds of merchant vessels and destroyed thousands of planes. While the sorties continue, some enemy aircraft penetrate our defensive ring. Guns aboard the warships bring down many of the raiders. Just released by the Navy, these scenes show the aircraft carrier Saratoga hit 21st February, 2 days after the Iwo Jima invasion. In succeeding months, kamikaze raiders struck repeatedly with record intensity and fury. Passing a battleship, a suicide plane is hit many times before it dives into the after section of an Essex-class carrier. Commenting on damage caused by the Japanese suicide air war, Admiral Nimitz said, the enemy has expended a large number of planes and personnel on missions of this nature, with negligible effect on the continuing success of our operations. Some major units of the fleet have been damaged, but no battleship, fast carrier, or cruiser has been sunk. Effective methods of meeting and destroying suicidal attacks have been developed and will continue to be employed to increase the toll of Japanese aircraft shot down by our aircraft and our anti-aircraft guns. Meanwhile, following the Jap attacks, carrier aircraft return to undamaged or quickly repaired ships. One of the planes overshoots the flight deck. Another cuts over the side of the carrier and continues its flight. The majority of landings are without mishap as carrier warfare continues closer to the Japanese homeland. Men of the 96th Division attacking Zebra Hill, an enemy strong point near the village of Shuri on the Jap line running from Naha to Yonabaru. Tanks advance in the face of heavy enemy fire. Artillery shells score direct hits on Japanese positions. Advancing troops are driven back along the side of the hill. Machine guns cover a section of the advance as troops work their way to the top of a nearby ridge flanking Zebra Hill. Intense enemy fire causes heavy casualties. On top of the ridge, the troops dig in and open fire on Japs defending the other side of the hill. Shelling Zebra Hill in the final blow to demolish the position. On 14th May, elements of the 10th Army open an all-out attack against the Naha-Yonabaru line. flamethrowers in action against Chocolate Drop Hill, a strong point which has been holding up our advance for 5 days and inflicting heavy casualties. A 300-yard gain again wipes out the enemy position. Soldiers of the 77th Division, accompanied by a native, look for civilians reported hiding behind the front lines. The natives are discovered down deep wells in century-old caves dug about 30 feet below the surface and tunneled between a number of the wells. Altogether, about 150 persons are found hiding. They'd been below ground for 57 days. Many of them suffered from colds and sores and were infested with fleas. The cave ceilings are so low that many of the civilians could not stand upright. One of 2 babies born in the caves, the other baby born underground. The natives are taken to new quarters where they'll get clean clothes and medical care. Troops of the 77th Division cleaning out ridges bypassed in the capture of nearby Yonabaru. Snipers hiding in caves cause frequent casualties. Guns are set up to blast Jap positions which have been harassing supply lines in range of the bypassed hills. Tank destroyers are brought up to pound the caves. Tank flamethrowers burn out the last of the snipers. Men of the 77th Division moving up to the front. Lieutenant General Simon B. Buckner visits an observation post on the cracking Shuri line. The general confers with field officers after inspecting the battle lines. Ruins of the town of Yonabaru, eastern anchor of the Shuri line and second most important harbor in Okinawa. Naval bombardment and artillery fire on 22nd May almost completely leveled this east coast anchor of the Jap defense line stretching from Naha to Yonabaru. The town had a peacetime population of about 5,000. The railroad station. The depot for buses running between the nearby coastal towns. The smokestack served as an enemy observation post in this sugar mill north of Yonabaru. English and American machinery. Most main roads remain in fairly good condition despite rains and heavy traffic. A midnight rain floods tents of the 4124th Quartermaster Trucking Company. Water in some of the foxholes ranges from 4 to 8 feet deep. A jeep on a secondary road requires a bulldozer to get through. Because of the bad condition of this road, a bulldozer is kept available to keep traffic moving. The aftermath of a Jap suicide attack on Yontan airstrip. Striking in coordination with other enemy units in an 18-hour attack on 24th May, 13 sallies attempted to land on or near the airstrip, gasoline and ammunition dumps. 6 were shot down by fighters, 5 by anti-aircraft fire. Most of the crews in the planes that landed were killed in the crashes or by aircraft personnel. Wounded Japs destroyed themselves with grenades. A number of our planes were set on fire. Additional Marine Corps films of the fighting before the ridges guarding Naha. Tanks blast Jap positions in the hills outside the city. Ancient hillside tombs are used by the enemy for last-ditch defenses. One of our tanks catches fire after receiving a direct hit. The tank crewman escapes through the turret. A tank retriever comes to the aid of the disabled tank. As the retriever works quickly to repair the tank, crewmen find it necessary to shield the vehicles by tossing out white phosphorus grenades. A curtain of white phosphorus screens the operation. Heavy and accurate enemy shell fire from artillery emplacements on the ridgetops has been effective against our armored units. As the enemy finds the range again, the repaired tank and tank retriever move off. Naha is hit from the air as rocket-firing planes support the attack. A heavy artillery barrage supports the tank and Marine infantry assault. A sugar mill smokestack is smashed by a direct hit. Telephoto lens shots show retreating Japs running for cover while trying to escape our machine gun fire. Heavy automatic fire brings down the fleeing Japs. Tanks used in the Naha attack continue to be equipped with extra tread wrapped around front and side for additional armor. 6th Division Marines move ahead against the city's outlying defenses. Armor leads the attack to destroy small houses still standing after our artillery and Navy gun bombardment. The houses afford cover for enemy forces committed to the city's defense. Following the tanks, troops close in to wipe out remaining Jap resistance. Elements of the 6th Marine Division capture western and eastern sections of Naha in a swift advance through the city 28th and 29th May.